what I found interesting was that it felt very different than the other two Harry Potter lands between Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley. And that was to be on purpose, in that you're technically not in the wizarding world, you're in 1920s Paris, which that in and of itself was actually really cool.
Yes.
And walking through, and even, I watched some YouTube videos, ahead of time I was watching with my 4-year-old son. He was like, hey, there's people walking in the street. Is that safe? And I was like, thank you so much for asking. It's in a theme park. People can walk in streets, which showed how real it really looked.
I love that.
That it was like, okay, these are these streets of Paris.
Tired of outdated systems holding your attraction back?
Gatemaster believes technology is part of the experience, transforming every touchpoint into an opportunity.
Imagine seamless online booking, effortless mobile ordering, and data-driven insights at your fingertips.
Ready to revolutionize your guest journey and maximize revenue?
Power your attraction with Gatemaster.
Discover the future at gatemaster.com.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros Podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros Podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt. Doing really well. It's nice to see you here in person.
In person. We've done a couple of these.
We have.
Where we've been in person, but
Yeah.
Where are we?
Well, first, how are you?
I am fantastic.
All right.
Yes.
We are at the Sawgrass Marriott Resort in beautiful Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, at the Florida Attractions Association Conference, and I feel like we are recording a late night podcast right now. It is currently 7:57 p.m. It is bright as day outside because it is June, but I've been up for a very long time and have had a full day we've both had a full day of travel and networking, and
Yes.
the conference just started.
It did.
At the time of this recording.
And it's going very well so far.
So far.
It's power up.
It is power up.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you.
Okay.
So you and I have both been to one of the newest attractions in the attractions industry. If you could think of one word that would describe it, what would that word be?
Pretty awesome.
That's 2 words and many syllables.
And neither of them were the ones you were thinking of.
No, not at all.
I think this is a pretty lowball question here, and I guess I'll just give you the right answer. That, of course, is epic.
It is epic, yes, because you and I, at different times, had the opportunity to go visit Universal's newest park, Epic Universe. So we thought it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about it here on the Attraction Pros podcast.
Gives us content.
That it does. So you've been there, I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
It's now open to the public every single day.
And to clarify, we both went during preview soft opening. We have not been since the grand opening. This is just our first opportunity that we have to be able to actually sit down and talk about our thoughts.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So, speaking of thoughts, do you have any sort of overarching overall thoughts that you'd like to start with, and then we can maybe dive into some details?
Yeah, sure. I could say we've got some overarching overall. We could try to keep it at 30,000 feet to the best of our abilities here.
For a little bit.
We're not very good at that. We usually peel back the onion pretty quickly.
We do.
I think on the whole, I mean, this is the newest major theme park to open, not just in Central Florida, but really the largest, newest theme park to open in the country in the last quarter century, really. If we really think about it, if we look at Central Florida in particular, Islands of Adventure opened in 1999, and that was 26 years ago. And so, and a lot of other parks have opened since then. We can give an honorable mention, of course, to Legoland, which is in Winter Haven, and even several water parks, including Volcano Bay and Aquatica, and I mean, just, not even Island H2O within the Central Florida park. But at this scale, I mean, I would argue that there are very few parks, even in the entire world, at this scale. It could probably, be counted pretty quickly. This was a big deal. This was just the fact that it now is open in and of itself is epic. And if you even think about the timeline, this was announced quite a while ago, and we'd been anticipating it for many years. The pandemic paused construction. I think that we all kind of were sort of holding our breath for a while at the beginning of the pandemic of, is this project going to continue? And then exhaled a huge sigh of relief when it was announced, yes, the construction will continue on, and we're going to continue moving forward. So this has been, in the waiting for so long. And what's really interesting is that, theme parks take a long time to build, which is a really easy statement, right? And when we think about it's got the latest and greatest technology moves at such a fast pace. And I think we can confidently say that Epic Universe features so much of the latest and greatest technology in the industry.
What's interesting about that statement is, and I've had this conversation with a couple of people, is yes, it's the latest and greatest, but it was also thought of 7 years ago.
Right.
So think about where the technology has now gone to 2025 and what can be thought of for the next big epic park, if we ever see that again, right, in the industry. So I think your point about this being such a big deal, this being an epic deal, I think is right on, because whether you're in the industry or whether you are an enthusiast, things like this don't just happen. And I also had a thought about other industries, because I have friends in other industries, you have other friends in other industries, and I was really trying to think about an event, an entity that had this wide-ranging impact on the guests, the guest experience, the people who put it together, an entire industry. Like, I have friends that worked in the phone company for a long time, that built tires, that painted cars. And I can't think of a $7 billion investment that had this kind of impact on all those different people.
Aren't we just so lucky to be in this industry and that this is what we get to be excited about?
Yes, yes, 100%. 100%.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I think it's hard to draw a comparison there, which to me makes it that much more awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I completely agree. So what were your some high-level 30,000 foot views as we start to navigate that?
I think my big takeaways were the design of the park, how it made you feel. Like, we can get into the nitty-gritty of the different coasters and the rides and things like that, but I think every land had a distinct feel. So Celestial Park has a feel of, to me, it felt like a neighborhood. You know, that you're walking through, and there's
like a park.
There's a bar there, there's a restaurant, there's fountains, and what was interesting is I remember hearing when people were talking about the design kind of aesthetic of Epic Universe, that this part of the park was going to bring the park back into theme park. And when you look at what's in there, like in terms of classic attractions, there's a carousel and a roller coaster. Those are the only two rides in that area. And then there's the fountains that, can be enjoyed by everybody. There's restaurants and bars and things of that nature. And then you go into the portals, and each portal had a distinctive feel. And I think my big takeaway about all of that is that somebody had to really think about it. Like, all the details that you see and all of the decisions that had to be made over that course of time, you really get to see how people weren't just designing this to be an operational theme park.
Right.
They were designing it because they love theme parks.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I took away from it.
Well, even if you make other comparisons, if you now take the three theme parks, sorry, Volcano Bay, the three theme parks at Universal Studios, Islands of Adventure, now Epic Universe, when you walk through Universal Studios, you sense an element of transition, but not overly significant, right? When you go from one area, and in fact, many of them blur, and just with the way that attractions have turned over the last 35 years, almost to the day, at the time of this recording, right? You then get to Islands of Adventure, and there are distinct transitions. The bridges that go from one island to the next, I say that in air quotes because they're not really islands, but there's kind of the waterways that kind of jut out to it, that those are the spokes, make it feel like islands. And you say, okay, the music then changes. You at least sense a transition. You can kind of see the evolution of theme park design of saying, okay, we're literally taking you from one physical space to another, and we're doing it by making a complete and total separation. So one of my observations was that the transitions were just amazing to walk through. Did you have any favorites?
In terms of the transitions themselves,
Yes.
or the lands?
The transitions themselves.
I'm going to be honest, I don't know that I noticed them all that deeply. I would
Okay.
think I was so excited to get to the land that, and I know there's a lot of details there, and I've seen spoilers of, Harry Potter and the different wands and things like that are on the structure, but I don't know that I went that deeply into the transition, if that makes sense.
Okay. For me, my favorite transition, and of course everyone will have their own and their own unique experiences, right? Was Nintendo. I don't know. So this one part of it is I don't know if this was purely coincidence or theme park magic, but I experienced a weather delay, as many people do in Central Florida, particularly in the late afternoon in the summer months. And it was a thunderstorm, and I was going from Dark Universe to, I rode out the thunderstorm in Dark Universe, which is very applicable, right?
I was going to say, this seems very appropriate.
Yeah. And then I walked to Nintendo, and it was storming when I walked in, and when I walked out, it was sunny, and there was no rain.
How did they do that?
Right. So I don't that was literally a transition that happened. But the other piece of it too is by the time I got through it, and there's an elevation change in that portal. I'm not going to give away too much, but I walked through feeling normal, and the second I felt like I was just spit out through the green pipe, and I was right in my childhood. To me, if you were to ask me which IP do I most affiliate within that park, it is Super Nintendo. And looking at the visuals and hearing the sounds and seeing the effects and the things that are floating, to me it took my breath away, and I stopped and was just like, whoa. I mean, it felt like I was in the game, and I know that is what an immersive experience does. And I know we talk about immersive experiences a lot, whether it's in an ice cave or at a distillery or in a theme park, right? Or seeing live music in Italy, right?
Yes.
Trying to think of all the times that we've run it. But to me, I just felt like I was there. And I could see the blocks floating up and down, so much movement, the mushrooms were spinning, and of course there were other guests in it, and it was very busy. It wasn't overly crowded, but it was busy. There was a good amount of busyness happening in it. To me, I just genuinely felt like I knew that I was going from one space to another. I don't think I could feel any more as if it was replicating the feeling of going through the pipe and being spit out the other side.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what's interesting, you and I are of different ages. I'm a little bit older.
We are, yes.
Nintendo was not part of my childhood. And I must say that was the land that I had the least connection with.
Okay.
Absolute least connection with. So,
Well, Harry Potter wasn't part of your childhood.
no, but at least I've watched some of the movies.
Right.
I've not read the books, but I've watched some of the movies. Obviously, I've been immersed in the other two Harry Potter areas at Universal theme parks in Florida. But I walked in there and I saw things that were really cool, right? And I wanted to experience it, but I felt no emotional connection.
Okay.
And I think it's to exactly what you said. It was not my childhood, and to the point where I've thought about my next visit to Epic Universe, because this will not be my last. And if I were to, plan my day, I may or may not even go to that land. Now, I didn't get to experience the rides in there, right? Downtimes and things like that. So I didn't get to do Mario Kart, didn't get to do Donkey Kong. But based on what I did in the rest of the park, I'm kind of okay with that.
Okay.
Do I want to go experience them at some point in my life? Yes. Mm-hmm. Is it a priority? Maybe not. If I could choose, and I did the day that I was there, because I spent 12 hours there. I did not have a weather delay, thank goodness. I was there by myself, so I could choose my own adventure as I went. I rode Stardust Racers 8 times,
Wow.
4 on each side. Monsters, rode that 3 times. So again, I could choose what I want to do. And when I think of how I want to go experience Epic Universe again, Nintendo might not be part of that day unless I've got extra time. So for context, in terms of like Super Mario, the Mario Kart ride, I was in line and I was literally feet from the loading platform. I was at the top of the stairs and the ride broke down. It breaks down. I was not annoyed by that at all. But I had already been on Stardust Racers. I had already done Monsters Unchained. And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, it's been 5 minutes. It's been 10 minutes. It's been maybe 15 minutes. And I'm sure you've seen this. People start to sit down in the queue. When they know it's been a while and it's probably going to be a while, they start to sit down. So people were starting to do that. Totally fine. I started feeling antsy. Like there's so much more of the park that I want to go see, that I need to get back to, that I was like, I'm okay if I just go ask the attendant if there's a way that I can leave and not experience this. If I come back today, I come back. But if I don't, I don't. And I think, again, that goes back to the emotional connection that I did not have in that area, but you did.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that also ties in, when we go and we experience theme parks or attractions as a guest, we see it through the lens of the guest. And I think that right there is it. Everything that you said wasn't anything maybe that was groundbreaking or like a new like revolutionary kind of thing, but maybe for those who are listening or watching this, it's that kind of reminder of what are guests thinking about when they're experiencing downtime. There are those who say, we're going to ride this out. We're going to sit down and I'm going to pull up the heads up app on my phone and drain the battery. We're all going to play here together, right? And there's the guests who say, I'm anxious because of the downtime, and what am I giving up by standing here and waiting? And whether you do anything about that or not doesn't need to change anything, but at least that then changes the way we interact with guests, or the way that we actually, maybe it's making announcements in the queue, or maybe really respecting their time and whatever the preferences might be.
And there were some announcements.
Yeah.
I think they did a good job of letting people know in a themed way that it's not operational. I don't remember their verbiage, but it was very themed to the attraction. But I just got that feeling like there's other things that I want to do. And I think that's a good point, that our guests are feeling that way. And I think that's also, you worked in guest services for a long time. Expectations is a big driver of that behavior, right? So if I was there with my family and I was trying to get on every single thing that I wanted to do, and that was my expectation, well, now that's not happening. And now I'm thinking, okay, what do I need to get the kids on, next, or where do we need to go? And we're wasting time. And, that can drive some of that negative guest behavior that we've all seen.
Yeah. You mentioned announcements. We both mentioned announcements. and that tied in one other thing that I thought of. I think we're going to kind of meander maybe through altitude here of 30,000 feet to ground level and maybe back all around. I was in line for Stardust Racers, and it was 3:30 in the afternoon in May, which meant that there was an impending storm. And they were making announcements in the queue that there was weather in the area and that the attraction may experience, a weather delay while continuing to operate. And the first time I heard it, I thought it was going to be the weather delay announcement. I was like kind of prepping myself for that. And then when they said the ride may close if lightning is, and it was a pre-recorded announcement. I really appreciated that. And I'm sure that that's in place at a number of other places. I don't think personally I've experienced that or seen that. So I made a note of that, of saying, okay, as managing expectations is, we're in line for a ride. I expect I'm going to be able to ride it. They now were able to shift that expectation a little bit, which meant that when it did not go down and I got on the ride, that experience actually exceeded my expectation. Not to say like you should lower your guests' expectations, but it created a more realistic expectation of, I might encounter a delay while I'm here.
Well, I think it goes back to managing expectations, right? Your guest expectations. So How many guests are going to visit a Central Florida theme park and not know that it rains at 3 or 3:30 every day
Yeah, that's
during
the
summer?
Sunshine State.
Right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be raining, right?
Or that when it rains, those thunderstorms are pretty brief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I know I've talked to those guests and they say, hey, my vacation's ruined. I'm like, wait 10 minutes
Yep.
and you'll be fine.
Yep,
You'll be
I want a
fine.
refund.
So, exactly. Exactly. So speaking of kind of 30,000 foot to ground level, were there any details or specific things that you saw that you were just kind of wowed by or just really feel like we need to talk about this?
So on the theme of Stardust Racers, well, first we can talk about the Easter egg of the flux capacitor. Like, somebody made a decision to do that, it was approved, and it happened, and
I loved it.
It's amazing. Like,
Yes,
it's
yes.
just like, they did it. It was like, they didn't have to do that, and they did it. Like,
Yes.
very small touch, not a huge investment, but like, something that made it very memorable and just the homage. I will also say, Dueling Dragons walked so Stardust Racers could run. I see you nodding in agreement.
Yes.
You wrote it 8 times. I
did.
wrote it once.
Well, I'm nodding in agreement because I'm glad you brought that up because you said that to me before, and I 1,000% agree. So tell me about your impressions.
The first half of the ride is amazing. The second half of the ride blew my mind. And I don't know how much more detail I want to get into, or maybe I've already like set the expectation very high, but just the elements of a dueling coaster. When you think of Dueling Dragons, later becoming Dragon Challenge, but referring to it by its birth name.
By its proper name. For many of us.
There were 3 near miss elements on it, and there was the camel hump over the 0G roll. There were the loops, and then the interlocking corkscrew, which was more aesthetic than it was actually near miss. I'll just say the second half of Stardust Racers is almost entirely near miss.
Yes.
Like I just felt like every time we like passed it, then we were just there again, and we were just there again. And the first half, again, was a lot of fun. And I was just like, oh, this is a great dueling coaster. And then the second half, after that second launch, it's just like, no, now you're in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Not to nerd out or,
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would agree with what you said there. Now I want to ask a question. Where did you sit in the train?
Not at the middle, between the front and the middle. I think maybe third car.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because one of my big takeaways from Stardust Racers is that it makes the middle of the train cool again.
Yeah.
Because they have a queue where you can wait for the front. And
As any good coaster does.
and being a coaster nerd, of course I did. I'd ridden it, I think 2, maybe 3 times, and I decided I'm going to wait for the front, see what it's like. Great ride in the front, not as good as in the middle or in the back. And it has nothing to do with, what we typically talk about in coaster nerddom as, the rush of being in front, or the whipping around that you get in the back. It's all about how it interacts with the other train. The very first time that I rode it, I think I was on the yellow track, and we were dispatched without the green track going out. So there was no dueling, right? So it was like, okay, again, if this were a single track coaster, it'd be a good ride. But what makes it, to me, elevate to that next level is the dueling and racing part of it. And it's that interaction between the 2 different trains. And you're absolutely right. That second half of the ride is unbelievable. It's amazing. But again, I found that it was the interaction with that other train that really made that ride. So that's why I called it a thriggle ride, which is a thrill and a giggle.
Yeah.
So, because I
A
thought
term that only Matt Heller could come up with.
I thought this is a good thrill ride,
Yeah.
right? There's definitely thrill. There's definitely, positive and negative G's, but it made me giggle because of the interaction again with the other train.
Have you been on Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind?
I have, yes.
I would also define that as a thriggle.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've only been on it once.
I've been on it twice.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of comparisons between Stardust Racers and Velocicoaster.
Fair.
I have not been on Velocicoaster recently enough to be able to make a specific comparison, but I could see it. But the details in Stardust Racers, I think, really, to me, set it on another level again.
Yeah.
Also, the way it sits in the park and you walk on the midway in front of it, and both trains come out at the same
Yes.
time, and yes, all that's amazing.
They did a fantastic job of the visual elements that surround it. And Celestial Park is intended to be that aesthetic, that
Yes.
that beauty of a theme park, and they did a great job with that.
Yeah.
I'll ask the same question to you. Was there anything in particular that wowed you?
So this may be a little bit of a spoiler, but I'm going to say it anyway because it truly wowed me. In Dark Universe, first of all, I was really looking forward to that land because it just looks cool, you know, the darkness of it and things like that. And so when I walked in and I saw Igor, which we've probably all seen online if you've not been there in person. Loved seeing his interactions with people. Loved the fact that when I was there were people in like Igor cosplay, like they were already dressing up like him, and this was May 14th. So even you know, like you said, before the grand opening, but enough people knew about him. And there was one person who had a shirt that says "I love Igor," you know. So I just love that character is getting the love. But that's not what blew me away. What blew me away was when I got onto Monsters Unchained and Igor is in the ride. I don't know why, but that set me into thinking about, again, the immersion of it, because here's this character where you and I have seen Streetmosphere at a lot of different parks, and it's great. Okay, boom. Then you go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But they wove in the Streetmosphere with an actual character that's in the ride. And by the way, acts exactly like the character outside. So to me, that was such a clever, unique tie-in that I don't know that I've ever seen done like that before.
Yeah. I mean, talk about the level of immersion in that here's a ride in a box, right? That
Yep.
in theory stands on its own. And by seeing the character interacting with guests outside of it, it extended beyond. Because a lot of times, especially, I would say, especially for an indoor dark ride, you go into it, you ride it, you go out. And
Yes.
then, you know, it's like when you like see a movie in the middle of the day, you walk outside, you're like, you get blasted with sunlight, right? So, and then you just like immerse back into the rest of it. But because it's all within the contained land, there needed to be cohesion entirely with that. Now, if he was in Celestial Park, that would have been a little jarring.
That would have been weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But being there in Dark Universe, say, hey, it is worth it to be here just to be in the land. Riding the ride now connects it all together.
Yeah. And the ride, to me, blew my socks off.
That's what
I
I've heard.
love that ride. Did you get to go on it?
Sadly, it was down. It was down for mechanical during the weather delays. So I rode out the weather delay in Dark Universe in the Burning Blade Tavern.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. Which that's a cool place too.
Well, and I saw the flame. That
Yeah.
was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I did not see the flame, but I did
Okay.
seek out the tavern just
Yeah.
to see what it was like. I had a similar feeling, well, quasi-similar feeling back there that I did at Mario Kart, because I was like, this looks like a really cool place to hang out, but like there's a big park out there that I'm missing. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it could be a great place to have a drink and cool down and, you know, get out of the sun. But that's not where my mind was at the moment. You know, so I didn't get a drink, I didn't stay, but I wanted to make sure I sought that out. The Monsters ride to me was like Forbidden Journey and Spider-Man had a baby. Maybe not to give too much away, but I will give a little bit away. I loved the story. You know, some people I've read online that they didn't like or appreciate or understand the story. To me, it was pretty straightforward. I got it like first time. Very, to me, easy to understand. But the way it took the Forbidden Journey model and took it to the next level, I thought was unreal.
Whoa.
Unreal. Yeah. Whoa. And I remember taking a picture, taking a selfie. I never posted it, but it was just a picture of me doing this. Like afterwards, like my jaw was dropped. And I had to go ride it a couple more times.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Did you get to experience Harry Potter?
The ride was not running.
Okay.
But I got to go in through the flue and went into the big room where I
Okay.
didn't know what was going on, but it was amazing.
I felt the same way. That was cool.
Now, so here's maybe a difference between Nintendo World because I had no connection to that IP. I have a little connection to Harry Potter, but I felt more willing to just kind of check it out and walk around, because it was inside too, not gonna lie. But I felt more comfortable spending some time in there, even knowing I wasn't getting on the ride. Because the day that I went, Curse of the Werewolf and the Harry Potter ride were both down all day. And they talk about managing expectations. They told us that up front. I wasn't expecting to get on either of those. So I was totally fine with that. But seeing the flu trick, if you will, and just kind of walking through it and being in that space was really cool. I will also say that because that ride was not operational and I didn't see the Harry Potter show, I didn't spend a ton of time in the Harry Potter world. I probably would have spent more time there if the ride was up and running. I know there's a ton to see. I'm sure I missed a bunch. I did like in some of the other Harry Potters, there's kind of nooks and crannies and little pathways and alleyways and things like that. There's a little bar in the back that I definitely would have gone back to. But, you know, again, I have a little connection with that IP, not that much. But I think if I rode the ride and spent a little bit more time in there, you know, I would have enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah.
You know, seeing some of the Easter eggs and things like that. But it just, again, there were more things calling my name.
What I found interesting was that it felt very different than the other two Harry Potter lands between Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley. And that was to be on purpose, in that you're technically not in the wizarding world. You're in 1920s Paris, which that in and of itself was actually really cool.
Yes.
And walking through, and even, you know, I watched some YouTube videos, you know, ahead of time I was watching with my 4-year-old son. He was like, hey, there's people walking in the street. Is that safe? And I was like, thank you so much for asking. It's in a theme park. People can walk in streets, which showed how real it really was.
I love that.
That it was like, okay, these are these streets of Paris. And I thought that alone, I kind of just meandered my way around it, and then also was able to go into the queue and then see the flue and then the big room.
Yes.
Yes.
Which I don't know what that room is. I'm sure many of our listeners can tell us, but I don't know what. Anyway.
It's going to come to me by the end of it's going to come to me immediately after we finish recording.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Well, I don't think we can not talk about Burke.
Burke.
One of my favorite areas. And I had not seen the movie before I knew I was going. And once I knew that I was going to be going, I watched the movie.
Okay.
Which it was cute.
Okay.
Good movie, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I loved Isle of Burke. Did you get to go in there?
Yeah. So I have not seen the movie.
Okay.
And which then made me actually it was like the least connection to any of the IP. And I walked in there like very close to the end of when I needed to leave. And the second I walked in, I thought, I wish I had more time. This is so cool. Just it felt just very whimsical.
Yes.
So many moving parts. Kind of like how I felt in Nintendo with all the moving parts. But I see the coaster coming around. I see the dragon over here. And then I was able to interact with some characters while I was in there. I was able to do a lap around it. It also maybe felt like one of the larger lands. I could be right.
I would say it felt like that for
they
sure.
all felt pretty large, I would say. But the level of detail that went in there, I mean, I just took pictures and I was like, I can just see, I see multiple, rides and coasters in the hotel and the sunset spot, just from a visual and aesthetic standpoint, and just the audio. I mean, it just felt fun to just be standing in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you still have not seen the movie, is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Like I said, I did watch the movie, and there was something that really, I would say, attracted me to Toothless, the dragon.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you and I talked about this offline yet, but I noticed when I was watching the movie, and I only saw the first one, that Toothless's movements were very similar to a puppy.
Okay.
I don't know if that's intentional, like to, I don't want to say humanize him, but canine-ize him, right? Because obviously there's a lot of people, including myself, that love dogs, right? And if you can make that connection that, yes, this is supposed to be a dragon, but he's got a lot of puppy movements, you build that deeper connection.
Sure, I can see that.
So that's one thing that I thought was really cool. Like I didn't do the meet and greet experience, but you can walk by and see it. And so you can see, other people interacting with Toothless, the real dragon.
Yeah.
And then obviously, there's references all around the land. But because I saw the movie and I kind of knew what things were, like I don't remember all the names and everything, but it made sense, and I had that much more connection to it than I did to Nintendo.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, did you get to do any of the attractions when you were in there?
No.
Okay.
I didn't, because I didn't expect the lines to be so long for them, which was fine.
Yeah.
But I had such little time left before I had to go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I did Hiccup's wing gliders.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like from a family and story coaster perspective, I did it twice. It was that good. Like a lot of times we think about family coasters and they're kind of lame,
Yeah.
in the history of family coasters, right? But this one, I think it was smooth. It had good elements. Like you could have told me it wasn't a family coaster and I would have believed you,
It
right?
looked like Hagrid's.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a really good ride. I also got to see the show.
I've heard the show is pretty awesome.
It is. Now, we've only had a couple of swear words on the Attraction Pros podcast, but I'm going to share one.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Because there is a point when something, won't give away too much, you can probably go on YouTube and figure it out. Something happens above your head, and I looked up, and I said, holy shit. What was happening above my head? Okay, I don't want to, like I said, give too much away if somebody hasn't seen it, but it's pretty flippin' amazing, right? I will also say at that attraction, because I had seen, or at that show, because I had seen the movie and Toothless seemed like a little puppy to me, and I love dogs, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little emotional when Toothless came out. I had it was a little dusty in there.
Yeah.
A little tear formed in my eye, because there was a little bit of a connection there.
Okay.
And when you see it in quote unquote real life, and you see what it's doing, like it's a moment that I don't know that I'll ever forget.
Wow.
So yeah, exactly. So highly, highly recommend.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did you take home some plush after? Did that? I mean, that'll sell retail.
Oh, it will. It will. I only bought food there, so
Okay.
I didn't get any retail. I did walk in the retail stores and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we've talked about this before, that my typical MO at a theme park is not to spend a lot of time in the retail shops. I'm sorry, retail people, but that is not my MO. I'm coasters, I'm experiences,
Yeah.
I'm food. That's my MO. So, no, I didn't. It didn't sell any plush for me, but I'm sure it sold for some other people.
Yeah. We also, I feel like we need to talk about the fact that this theme park has a hotel.
Yes.
I've wondered for many years why not just integrate hotels into, and it's done. There are other. This is not the first, but it's not very common, and it felt very seamless to have Helios in the park. And what was cool was, as I was meandering around Celestial Park, went in and I walked into the hotel, and I walked through the lobby, and I walked out the front door, and I basically was on Kirkman, and then I turned around and I was within 1 minute back in the park. And that was pretty cool. And I think that just brings that, closeness of the properties of the experiences together. And obviously there's, logistical conveniences of it, I can wake up, take the elevator to the theme park. But I think it's just really well done the way that they made that happen.
So logistically, after you were on Kirkman and came back through the hotel, did you have to show a ticket again? How did you get back in?
Yeah, I pulled up my
Yeah.
They have a full admissions
Yep.
entrance and
Okay.
Metal detectors, metal detector technology has become less and less friction, over the
Cumbersome?
last several years. Cumbersome,
Yeah.
But it was a regular just admissions experience. Just going through the metal detector, scanning the ticket. Now I'm back in the park.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was also signage and reminders of when you're walking into the hotel, you are leaving the park, and then
Yes.
back in of you are now coming back into the park,
So speaking
or
of
now you are entering the park, I should say.
So speaking of technology, was there anything else that you noticed throughout your experience in terms of a cool new technology that you thought, this is really cool?
Put me on the spot here. Why don't you answer first while I think about it?
The lockers at Stardust Racers.
Okay.
I have not experienced, first of all, I love the two-sided lockers like they
Yes.
have at Velocicoaster, A+. But the facial recognition, the where you could walk up to it, have them scan your face, it opens a locker for you. You don't choose it, right?
Yes.
It's almost like the wand choosing the wizard. The locker chooses
Locker
you.
chooses. That's good.
So thank you. So you put your stuff in, close the locker, you go enjoy the ride. You come back, you just look at the thing, right? As long as you're in the right bank, you look at the thing, your locker opens. You don't have to remember what locker you're in. You don't
Right.
have to remember a combination. You don't have to remember anything. You don't have to have a little piece of paper that says put in this code.
Or the key.
When you come out, or the key.
With the
or
tight
wristband.
fraying, rubber band, basically.
Talk about frictionless experience to store your stuff so you don't lose it on the ride.
Yeah.
I loved those lockers.
So, my experience with the Stardust Racers locker was not entirely frictionless.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything you just said about technology was fantastic, and I made a note of this, and I was just like, okay, experience on Velocicoaster, on Steel Vengeance, it's the double-sided lockers, I think just makes the most sense to be able to enforce a loose article policy, particularly when it's placed in the right spot in the queue. It was nice to not have my phone for, I think, 25, 30 minutes or so, but just knowing okay, ideally this should be as close to the entrance as possible without minimizing the operation. So for those unfamiliar, you're waiting in line like normal. You then get to the locker bay where there's an attendant. Everyone scatters into the locker bay. They do exactly what you just described. Go up to one of the 5 or 6 bays or so.
Yeah.
I
don't remember exactly.
Facial recognition. It pops open a locker. You close it. You then re-enter the line. I went up to a bay with the shortest queue because everyone went in. Now everyone's standing in line to open their bay, and I get there and I wait maybe 4 or 5 people deep. So a couple of minutes are going by, and I get there and I put my face up to it, and it tells me that the bay is full. So the guest before me took the last locker within that cluster. So I go to the next bay, and there's about 4 or 5 people, and I get to the front, and the bay is full. And then I get to the next, and now I'm kind of scrambling of which one has the shortest line, how do I know which lockers are open or not? I finally get a locker. At this point, now everybody who was behind me in line, probably 50, 60 people or so, are now in front of me in line because of the amount of extra time it took me to get my locker.
Yes.
I asked the attendant for a service recovery experience to be able to bypass the part of the queue where, and I wouldn't normally ask. I wouldn't be hey, can I go in front of these people? I'm just am I able to regain my place in line because I had a hiccup here at the lockers? And I was told, unfortunately, no.
Did your spidey senses go off when you heard the word unfortunately?
It did, a little bit, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Again, this was not a massive day-ruining service failure whatsoever, but it was a little bit of a friction point of how do I know that I'm in line for something that's going to be available when I get there while I'm already waiting in line for something else. And so then I had to now, I didn't lose my place in line entirely because now there was still, a long queue that had built up, behind it, but I lost a good couple of ride cycles, basically. Again, not catastrophic, not day ruining, not any of that, not give me a refund. But to compound that with after that, then I got upstairs and now going through the switchback queues was when the weather delay announcements were coming. And the only thing I could think of was if this ride goes down in the ride cycle right before I get on, I'm going to be pissed.
Yes.
Right? Thankfully, it didn't happen. I got on just fine. It was, it was totally fine. But that was one friction point that I experienced with the lockers at Stardust Racers, combined with all of the amazing benefits of the technology that's there. So combining the technology with the operational flow of it, of just acknowledging of just okay, if a guest experiences this type of friction point in it, can we accommodate them in a very feasible way?
Well, and I wonder, as we talk about the proactive version of that, and I don't know what the operational constraints are, but there is a point where there's an attendant that lets people into that locker bay area.
Yeah.
Not letting as many people into that area might alleviate some of what you experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't see the other side of it, of guests getting off and then opening their lockers.
Yeah.
Of just like, when are lockers going to become available, which would happen, very quickly.
Yes.
So I guess if I would have stood at that spot for maybe another minute, then it would have happened. But you're right. So that team member, that attendant, that locker bay crowd control position is pretty critical in managing how the queue is flowing.
Absolutely.
And frankly, they could wait for that entire thing to empty out entirely for guests to get up the stairs and pulse it through a little bit. It would back up the rest of the queue if we want to really get into the,
The nitty-gritty of it,
logistics of this.
Yeah.
But overall, it would make the process a little bit more seamless, make it much more likely that more lockers are opening up while in the interim.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I will say that there was one concern that I had with the lockers and the facial recognition, is that when I opened the locker, I had my glasses on. And then I put my glasses in the locker.
Yeah. Will it know
then
who you are?
Will it open the locker? And it did. It did.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is how they were designed to be used, but this is what I did. The last 4 rides of the night for me were 4 rides on Stardust Racers. So I never even bothered getting my stuff out of the locker. I just kept going around. But yeah, I mean, that to me was, again, my experience was very seamless, very easy, which I liked.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did you experience any concerns or friction points in your experience?
So the Untrainable Dragon show, I tried to get into like 2 or 3 different ones as they were on the schedule, and I would go back, or I look at the app and stuff, and it would say, yep, the 2 o'clock show is still happening. I walk over there like, well, we're not really sure. And I get it, new technology and the whole 9 yards. And so I got over there for, I think, the second to last show of the day. And so this is a 2-sided thing, because they didn't know, let's just say it was 4 o'clock. I don't remember at the time. But at like 3:59, there was people out in that area. They had not let anybody in.
Oh.
They weren't sure if this was going to go at like 3:59. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was a little hairy out there because people were coming in. They had not had, I don't know that they had any shows earlier in the day. So now everybody that wanted to see the show was coming to this show to see if it was going to be happening. And so you had a lot of people out there. So that's probably the closest that I had to, that kind of hiccup, no pun intended, in
Fair.
Burke. But this is where it's double-sided, because there was a gentleman, a team member named Kane, and he was amazing at crowd control, because he didn't just stand up at the rope yelling at people. He had a couple other team members up there so that they could maintain control of that access point, but he came out into the crowd and he would talk to people as close as this or even closer and say, he's like, my friends, I'm just not sure if we're going to be able to go. We're doing everything we can. As soon as we know, you'll know. And
good communication.
Absolutely. And like, he would say it to one person and then turn around and say it to another person and then keep working. He worked the crowd, in there. So finally, at like 3:59 and a half, they opened the rope and were able to go in. And so that was the show that I saw. But I also saw him with the Guests with Disabilities line, and he was amazing with those folks. So I was able to see a great team member at work, even though there was that little bit of a hiccup with our loading. And I saw him after the show too, and he was, right there as we were walking out the door. And I said to him, you are great at crowd control. He's like, thank you, and he was really appreciative. And I was able to also tell somebody that I know that works at Epic Universe to make sure he got some extra recognition. But I just thought that that little hiccup was handled really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I can't think of any other big ones. I mean, again, rides went down.
Yeah.
And so there was a period of time where it's like, all right, I want to get one more ride on Monsters Unchained, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the night at Stardust Racers. However many more rides I can get in the rest of the night. Well, Monsters was down. And so I was like, well, I can wait for a little bit. I definitely wanted one more ride. So you talk about the kind of the hometown feel of Celestial Park. I walked out there and there was a bar. They have old fashions. I had an old fashioned, and I wasn't sure what the alcohol responsibility was around the park. You know, could I take it out from where that bar was and that type of thing? And the bartender says, you can walk around this whole park with that drink. So I'm like, okay,
Now,
cool.
was it Buffalo Trace?
It was not.
Okay.
It was not. That would have been a nice tie-in. I think it was Four Roses. But anyway, so I sat on a bench, you know, in Celestial Park, and I kind of watched the fountains, and I enjoyed my old fashioned. And then when that was done, by that time Monsters was back up. I went over, took one more ride on that, and then spent the rest of the night at Stardust Racers.
I think you did exactly what you were meant to do. And I think that's what the park wants you to
Yes.
do. Grab that drink, sit on the bench, watch the fountains. Yeah.
And I think that's what left me with such a positive feeling about this experience. Again, I could go back to the park and completely ignore one of the whole areas of the park that so many people love, including yourself, right? But I know I would still have such a great time.
Yeah. Now, you were there for 12 hours.
Yes.
I would imagine you had one, possibly two meals?
2.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you, well, okay. What did you eat? Should ask that
So
first. Yeah.
for lunch, I had, and I don't remember everything that was in it. It was a salmon bowl that I got in Burke.
Okay.
I think it was the Spitfire Grill. And there was a little, so there was a little bit of a hiccup. Again,
All
pun
these
intended,
hiccups in Burke.
with the ordering process, but it was my fault because I was not familiar with the online ordering app. And so there was a team member out there and explained it very well. I went back, I did my mobile order, I came back, and I was like, how do I know when it's ready? Well, we'll call you, I think was the answer. And I'd waited for a little bit, and I went back up and was like, I had an order for, you know, this thing, whatever. And they said, well, we don't see the order. And they said, let me see your app. And I showed them my app, and she said, you didn't complete the order. So I didn't hit, I'm here, I think is what it was. Like, come back at this time, tell us you're here.
You ordered it.
I ordered it, but I didn't complete the, hey, I'm here, give me my food kind of thing.
Please.
So that, please. So that was all on me. I totally get it. But then the food itself was really, really good. Like, it was a piece of extremely well-cooked salmon. There was some vegetables in there, probably some rice fiber thingy. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what's in it. Some cooked tomatoes, I think. But it was really tasty, and it wasn't like a heavy burger that you know, was sitting in your stomach.
Yeah.
So I had that. And then at Das Steakhouse, I had I think it was a chicken, some sort of fried chicken sandwich, but I got it because it had the black bun, and I wanted to try the black bun.
Yeah.
And it was good. I wouldn't say it was the best chicken sandwich I've ever had, but the novelty, the Instagrammable part, was that it had this black bun. And it was a cool looking restaurant too.
Yeah.
So that's what I had.
I had, at the Burning Blade Tavern, I had a burger with the black bun. And I thought it was really good. Was it the greatest burger I've ever had? I don't, but it was, it was still really good. I'm glad you mentioned the mobile ordering hiccup that you had, because I think maybe there are some bugs to be worked out with even just the concept or the policy of mobile F&B ordering, because I was given conflicting information of I need to order on the app, and then when I did, I don't like tomatoes, so I wanted no tomatoes on my hamburger, and that was not an option. And so after I ordered it, and then pressed I'm here, and then walked up to the counter and said, I just put an order for a burger, could I get it without a tomato? And she goes, oh, you should have just ordered it with me directly. And I said I was unaware that that was an option. In fact, I was told the opposite.
Yeah.
So a little information kind of clarity, component with that. Now, did you have to order mobile or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, at the Yes. So both of them, if I remember correctly, definitely the Spitfire. And like I said, there was a person out there. They had a menu
Yeah.
to see what was available, but then they said you have to do the ordering online or on, through the app. Okay, fine. If I remember correctly, at Das Steakhouse, I want to say there was a QR code on the table,
Okay.
and then I ordered, and then they brought it out to me,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Why?
Curiosity.
Okay. Perfect.
Because 5 years ago, I recall we were sitting in the middle of lockdown, talking about like mobile F&B ordering. It's not brand new, but no parks are really doing it. But because of social distancing in the pandemic and not wanting to touch kiosks, we're probably going to be doing this all on our phone now. And this is going to be kind of this great evolution of the theme park experience. And it's being implemented in a number of places now, obviously Epic Universe being one of them. And it's an okay experience. Because sometimes you're just like, well, I just want to go up to the counter and order my burger. And then I'll stand here and wait, just the same as me being on my phone. Because now, did your phone, so I was texting you a couple times during the day.
Yeah.
And then you said, okay, I'm putting my phone back on airplane mode so I can reserve the battery.
Yes.
Because so much of the park experience requires you to be on your phone. Or at least the mobile F&B ordering or virtual queue, and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially even just being in a theme park for 12 hours, that'll, drain your phone battery completely.
Yeah.
So layering in you must do this on the app.
Yeah.
I think having it on the app as a convenience is great. In ballparks, it's like at Wrigley Field, I can order food from my seat. I can have it delivered to me, or I can get up and do the "I'm here" thing. When I get there. And I think that's a very good convenience. I can also stand in line and order it as well, or there are vendors in the ballpark too that I can, the same traditional experience.
Yeah.
So I think it's making sure your guests have options.
Yes, and I would say that I had different levels of satisfaction with the experience in the two different places.
Okay.
Because Spitfire Grill is a walk up,
Right.
And so I can kind of get it there, right? Das Steakhouse is more of a sit down place. It's, they've got a whole building for their dining area.
And it's a sit down quick service. Right? Because you order from the QR code.
Exactly.
You're not being waited on.
Right. Yeah. So maybe it's just me and what I'm used to, but I would rather order it and get it and then take it back, or have someone come out and, as a server, as a wait person, to come out and take my order and then go back. Maybe it's just me. I'm not as excited about ordering from a QR code.
Okay. Well, and I think that's kind of one of the things we were talking about of kind of with the queue management earlier, like the weather delay announcement, and looking at things through the lens of the guest. Mobile F&B ordering, I mean, from an operational standpoint, from a staff man, from a cash control standpoint, like so many amazing benefits from it. Let's just make sure we're also looking at it from the lens of the guest too. Yeah.
Well, I like your point about having options.
Yeah.
Right. So if I was at Das Steakhouse, and again, if I remember correctly, because I walked in and out of so many different places, I walked in and there's kind of a counter area. And if there's anybody from Epic Universe listening and I've got this wrong, just let me know. But then there was a team member directing me to the dining area to go sit down and then order from the QR code. If I had the option to order there, I probably would have taken it. And if they said, you can either order here or you can go leisurely look at the menu on your phone and get your whole family's order together and order it from the QR code, that's an option. I also see how, like you just said, with the benefits of mobile ordering, that now you're opening yourself up to other cash handling, even if it's not cash. It's still a credit card transaction, order accuracy, that whole thing. So I get that you're opening that up, but I think that option is also nice to be able to offer.
Yeah. And I will just say an oversaturation of QR codes. I mean, nobody knew how to use a QR code until the pandemic, and then everybody used them and loved them, and then we're like, oh, now
we can use it for everything.
Now we can use it for everything, right?
Yes.
And it's like, that's one of the things that even I'm trying to focus on with my clients too, of like, oh, we could do a QR code with this, but should we? Can we pull back on it? Do we just want to plaster QR codes all over this place?
Yeah.
None of them are going to get scanned for that.
Yeah.
Speaking of options,
yes.
I have one more, we can call it a friction point
in
the experience. You mentioned that Harry Potter and the Ministry of Defense I've now remembered what it's called.
Perfect.
Was not open the day we were
Correct.
there, right? Okay. It was open the day I was there, and virtual queue passes were being allotted at certain times during the day. I think there were 3 times during the day.
Okay.
I arrived just after 3 p.m., which was when one of the allotments was. And so I was unable to get it. The next time was at 6 p.m. In between that time, I went and I asked, is there a standby queue? They said no. I said, is there a single rider queue? I was also by myself. They said no. I said, okay. I said, I'm going to set an alarm on my phone for 5:58 p.m. just so I know I'm holding my phone. I was standing in the single rider line at Donkey Kong, Minecart Madness, which was a really fun ride, by the way. I will say, you get a chance to ride.
I will.
Oh, it was a fun ride.
Good.
A little bit of Thriggle on
Okay,
it, I would
okay.
say.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
And I'm refreshing it, and immediately at 6 o'clock, I go in and it's completely sold out. So virtual queue, another great option from an operational standpoint to be able to manage capacity and efficiency. It also adds a lot of inconvenience to a lot of, making them get it on their phone, right? Well, to interrupt the park experience. What if I was on Stardust Racers riding at 8? What if my phone was in the locker because I'm riding at 8 times in a row? Well, now I can't do that because now I got to think about the time to get back to my phone, get back to the locker and do that, right? And knowing that it limits a huge portion of your guests from being able to experience it, when the ride is fully operational, the guest is in the park, it's the only ride in the park that requires this. And yes, a lot of guests are going to do their research. A lot of guests are not going to do their research.
Right.
Still having the standby line available to some extent allows your guests to have options. And,
Absolutely.
And even if that line becomes super long, like giving both an option for virtual queue and standby queue allows more flexibility for the park experience. And then you can manage that. If you want to charge for the virtual queue, then there's now, I mean, that just files into the express option, right? But it created more of an inconvenience than an added benefit
Yep.
for the guest.
So, in total transparency, honesty, whatever you want to call it, when I heard that was down, because they were still doing virtual queue when I
Yeah.
went, when I heard that was down, I was kind of relieved because
a lot of stress out.
I wasn't going to have to do that process. I wasn't going to have to go through that. So that did help save the battery on my phone. But like I said, or like you said, I did go to airplane mode. I had an extra battery with me. I even brought a charging cord in case I needed to do that. But
Which you shouldn't have to do when going to a theme park.
no, but
I will say. Yeah, but I know. Right?
but also my phone is getting to the point where the battery is running out
Okay,
faster
fine,
than it
yeah.
should. But yes, I totally understand.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I was relieved a little bit when I realized I wasn't going to have to play that game because I had watched videos of people and here's how you do it and that kind of thing. And like, is that, and again, it could just be me, is that the experience that I want to have when I go to a theme park? Now, maybe I'm older. Maybe I, think of things a little differently. But that is not what I want to be doing. Now, again, mobile ordering, I get it. And maybe that's just something I've accepted, but trying to find that spot and jumping in there and having to do that at the exact moment, that for me is not the kind of experience that I want to have.
It's the equivalent to getting tickets to a Taylor Swift concert.
Because they run out so fast.
Yeah, or you're just refreshing
Yes.
Ticketmaster.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Or Jimmy Buffett when I would see him
Yeah.
when he was alive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And touring.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've gone 30,000 foot. I think we've gone 10,000 feet. I think we've gone below the ground. I don't know where. But based on our conversation, what do you think are some key takeaways or things that are overall impressions of Epic Universe?
I just can't wait to go back and be able to experience the things that I did get to experience and be able to experience the things that I did not get to experience, and to be able to get to a point where I can go to Universal Studios and I can just walk around very leisurely and I don't care if I ride anything or not. And I look forward to getting to that point with Epic Universe, which will require a few visits of saying I don't have any urgency to do anything, because the park is built to do that. It's built to allow you to meander a bit.
Absolutely.
Aside from when you're trying to get virtual queues. Yeah.
And I would say the exact same thing, that I cannot wait to go back. I'm so excited to go experience things again that I did do and experience the other new things. I also know, like I said, there's a lot of things that I missed just because I didn't know to look for them. And now I do. I've seen a couple of other videos and spoilers and things like that. So it's going to be fun to kind of explore that piece of it.
The level of detail into it was just incredible.
It was.
Yeah.
Or is, because it's still there.
Yeah.
But I just really, my overall impression is that it's a park that is absolutely re-experienceable. You get that repeat visitation feeling. And so for that, I cannot wait to go back.
Yeah, me neither. And I'd also just want to say congratulations to anyone who might be watching or listening to this who's on the team or part of the opening or on the crew or working somewhere in the park. And we've got a lot of audience members from the Universal community. So we're excited to have it as one of our amazing theme parks in our industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for going through the Epic Universe debrief.
Thank you.
A little bit, absolutely. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.